everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, we have Josh Torres.
Howdy.
Adam Vitale.
Welcome back, Brian.
James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
And Chaman Wu.
How's it going?
So yeah, I'm back. So I've been pretty off grid for just non-work related reasons. Basically, I was 2 weeks ago. I was helping install a floor at a family friend's house. Just like one of those vinyl tile things. They just kind of snap together, but it's still very tricky. And then last week it was a little bit of an extended weekend, not quite a vacation, but a short weekend trip. So thank you to Josh and everyone for holding down the fort for the last 2 weeks. I know you had some extended cast at least 2 weeks ago talking about Monster Hunter. I believe you had a few extra people on.
Mm-hmm.
And then last week you focused on the Suikoden remasters, which I did play Suikoden 1 over my trip as like my playing, late night in the Airbnb sort of game. So it was fun to play through, and I've also been playing through Monster Hunter, so it was kind of cool to listen to you guys as a just a listener to the podcast.
Home away from home,
Yeah. So it was just a personal trip to see some spring training in Arizona. So it was fun. First time doing that. Pretty off grid though for the last few weeks. So I was here 3 weeks ago when we talked about what was it? It was Avowed, and then it was Pirate Yakuza, I believe was the last one I was on. So I've not really been, keeping up to snuff on stuff. So this podcast will be a little bit of for me kind of getting my feet back.
So in your mind, the most recent releases were Avowed and Pirate Yakuza. Monster Hunter Avowed hasn't come out for you yet. Mentally.
But it's one of those things where I've played Monster Hunter, and this sounds kind of silly because like all of these games really in the grand scheme of things just came out, but when we talk about games on a weekly basis, some of them feel further away than they actually are. I've played through Monster Hunter, but I'm only quote unquote past low rank. Like I just saw the credits, which I know is not really it's just low rank.
That's it. You're never gonna catch up to everyone, dude. It's so over.
I already see people at Hunter rank like 100 plus, and I'm sitting here at Hunter rank 11. I'm so behind. I'll never catch up. I'll never enjoy whatever. But yeah, so maybe I'll talk about those things in passing as we go through the podcast today, as we do. But as we've been covering basically a new pretty big release every week since last October, I don't know, since forever. This week, we're going to be talking about the newest series entry in the Atelier series, which is Atelier Yumia, which we've talked about through several contexts about its potential shift to an action RPG, what it can take from the Ryza series all throughout the previews, and the preview opportunities we've had for that game. But we've had a few people on the podcast have a chance to play through Atelier Yumia and talk to it ahead of its official release next week. So both Chow and James have been able to play through Yumia, and I don't know who wants to take point on discussing this as our primary game this week. I guess I'll go to Chow first because Chow wrote the review for us. So we have the review up on the site, rpgsite.net. But if you have or haven't read the review, we'll give Chow a chance here to speak to Yumia. I don't know what else you've played on the Atelier series, or if it's been a while, and then we'll let James and Chow kind of bounce off each other as they discuss their time with the game. So Chow, take it away.
Okay, so I have played several Atelier games before, but I didn't really fully complete one until the Arlen Saga started. I started with the Iris series first.
I mean, can I just butt in real quick? I feel like that you already have a leg up on most Atelier fans if you're saying, oh, I didn't play until the Arlen Saga, when I feel like many modern fans started well past that. So you're a veteran.
Just based off sales alone, statistically, most people in the West definitely started with Ryza.
or Dust Trilogy at best. so
Chow's established yourself as an Atelier ancient gamer right now. Okay,
am I ancient now?
Okay, so let me just see if I can get this clear. It's Arland, then is Dusk after that, or am I skipping one? Like the trilogies?
Yeah, it's Arland, then Dusk, then Mysterious, then Ryza, which I think is a secret, and now it's Yumia.
And just to get the whole shenanigans, in my review, it's like Arlen has this time limit, so you have a certain time to get everything done, right? And they didn't really get rid of the time limit until the last game in the Dusk series, which is Shante or whatever it was.
Shally.
Scally. Okay, yeah, it was on that game, but they got rid of the time limit. It's not exactly on Ryza, but the way I say my review is Ryza. But if you want to be like so specific, you would say, you know, it's that game, right? But yeah. So, anyways, that's my experience with it. I played several of them. I was even talking to my friends, like, oh yeah, it's like, do you remember the Atelier game on a DS? It's like, oh yeah, Atelier Annie. It's like, but I'm sure nobody remember that game at this point, right? So, but anyways, that's my experience with it. What about yours, James?
I got started with the Dusk trilogy. I played Aisha on the Vita, and then I think what happened is that at the time, the person that we were going to have to review Ryza 2 ended up being busy, or I don't remember the exact circumstances, but I ended up getting assigned that. So I went back and played Ryza 1, and then I just ended up, that's how I ended up playing the
Backtracking.
Ryza trilogy. Yeah, yeah.
I forgot that you had to go back to go for Ryza 1. So
Well, no, I know I played Ryza 1 before I did the Ryza 2 review. It was like it was a situation where I was like, well, I'll just play this really quick.
He caught up before
For research.
the assignment. Yeah.
Caught up
Yeah.
for research. It's like he got the assignment and he did it.
Okay, so
But-
now fast forward is here. Now we're at Yumia. Now there's the next big mainline entry after the Ryza trilogy has passed us. I know there's been Resliana with the mobile game that came out in Japan and global, soon to EOS end of service and global, and then there's gonna be a spin-off or some new console title in the Resliana universe coming after this sometime. But right now, there's kind of like their next mainline saga, I guess, after Ryza, starting with this game, right?
Oh, I do think that if they do make like another game, it's like I don't know how to take from there. It's like most games, it's like there's lots of like kind of loose ends and stuff. I don't know. I feel everything wrapped up in this game.
okay, so Chow, let's assume that it's been a while since I've watched the trailers, or I haven't watched the trailers. Like, oh, a new Atelier game, and it's a new series. What does that mean? Like, just kind of tee us up. Like, what sort of game this is? Is it an open world action RPG? Is
Is it open world? So when I know the Atelier games just from a distance here, I know they've been getting more and more like open. So it's like this game open world, like I don't know, Final Fantasy 15 or something like that, where you can just you just have a big world to just kind of pick a direction and go.
Basically. But yeah, I just had to go to your atelier to start out the game. Once you play the introduction scene, which is kind of like a flash forward, which not many atelier games does. I think this is the first one that did the flash forward. Most game usually starts with this, like the main character is like from some humble town, and they will say that their full name is something something, but it's shortened to their title name. So usually that's how every like Atelier game starts. But this one starts with a flash forward to show you that, oh, this is a darker, serious. Is like we're taking this serious.
So,
or
so it's
something.
like a more action-packed. Like, hey, when you hit new game, it's like you're already in the middle of the action. I assume there's like the tutorial section. Something happens in that flash forward, which is like a cliffhanger. Then it like you're saying it goes, and then it goes like it flashes back to like, hey, how did we get there? Moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly
Okay.
how it starts.
Okay, so very Hollywood-esque. Sounds like.
But yeah, once you go to your atelier, it basically becomes an open world. You can just do whatever you want, and the game is pretty hands off. It won't tell you. It's like once the tutorial pop once, it'll never pop in again. You'll literally have to open the menu to search for a tutorial if you missed it, right?
So I know there's a bit tricky to answer on an audio-based podcast, but I guess not everyone's a fan of open worlds, and maybe some people are like, man, I don't really know if I want an open world for an Atelier game. Like, what's the general size of the open world here? If you can kind of give any sort of like comparisons to like another game that might be open world, like what sort of size of are we
I would
speaking?
compare it to Genshin. I am so sorry. I know people are gonna kill me for this, but if you play Genshin, you basically are all very familiar with like how this game works, right? And if I was going to compare it with Genshin, it would be like, oh, this game has 4 regions, but they're not at the scale of Genshin, right? So it'll be like maybe half of Genshin of the 4 regions combined with their 2 regions, I guess. That's how I would look at it.
so if you can do Genshin algebra, you can determine the size of Atelier Yumia.
It's like
But I assume because I know in some of the trailers they showed out there like eventually Yumia or the players get some sort of motorcycle compared to like say like you're saying Genshin. Would you say like the speed of traversal, whether it's like traveling across land or I don't know if there's a climbing element to this game, is it like generally slower or faster to navigate?
I say it's
than
much faster
Genshin?
because there's no stamina, so you could be always running. And the thing is, was it in Genshin? You always run out of stamina. So every like 20 seconds, you're like run out of energy, and your characters will be like jogging again, and then then they're sprinting. It's like it feels such a
I'm
pain
getting
to get to places.
PTSD of Dragon's Dogma.
Uh,
That's why you have
uh,
ox carts there. Anyway, go
And
ahead.
then
okay.
my favorite in
Oh,
Genshin is that when you run and you ran out of stamina and jump in the pool of water, you just instantly die. Right?
okay, let's shift a little bit of perspectives here because maybe people don't know or have played Genshin. So I'll put the same question to James and to James. How close or far away is this to say something like Xenoblade X when it comes to open world size and traversal?
Um, it's actually pretty similar, I'd say, to Xenoblade in terms of like scope. I feel like
Yeah.
I don't. It's definitely smaller than Xenoblade Cross,
Okay.
but it's. I think the best way to describe the open world is that I'm pretty sure Chow and I are on the same page about like how the game handles being an open world game. But I don't think the scope of the world is a problem. If anything, I think it's like the perfect size for what it's trying to be.
So it doesn't feel like there's a million billion miles between interesting things.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think the game overstays its welcome. It's like I got the game done pretty. I mean, I post my playtime in the staff channel. I don't think my playtime was
What,
too extreme.
what was your playtime?
Uh, my clear time was 32 hours.
Okay, that's basically you've cleared like how much optional stuff is that like 100% or close to
Not like
100%?
100%. It's like a 60% with each region. It's like normally it's like when you reach like 50%, you're basically done with that region, basically. Unless you want to go full 100% for the trophy, right? And then get
So not
everything.
so not quite so not quite critical path only, but not exhaustive. So somewhere in the middle, that's where you ended up at 30 some
I
hours.
also feel like okay, so I got the game and I got like 9 days to finish it, right? So that's basically when the code came in, and you're like, oh, it's like so I will stay up at this time. So I had to rush the last region because of like the embargo date, right?
Okay.
That's kind of like what I was doing.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. It happens to everyone in
Well,
this
yeah,
in
we
this
all
game.
the circumstances behind every game
Yeah.
in terms of time allotment
Yeah.
and how much you can put in are different depending on when you get the code, the scope of the game, what the critical path versus the 100% path, like the difference between those two extremes is. Because for some games it's very broad, and for some games it's not very different.
Okay, so like this question is for both James and you, Chow. Like, so I know a lot of people going to this game have probably played through the Ryza games, and like, I guess that's going to be the easiest way to like talk about this, given like what can players who played the Ryza trilogy expect out of Yumia? Do you think it's like a big departure, or do you think it's like it's leaning
Yes.
into the
I'd
natural
say
strengths of? Go for it, James.
I'd say that's very different because like Ryza, especially like 2 and 3 had way more of a story focus. Whereas Yumia, while there is a story, it feels like it's really kind of not a focus until the latter half of the game. And even then, it's conceptually, like if you wrote down the story on paper, I think that they could have done a lot better job at selling it.
Mhm.
But I think Chow and I are of the same page where it's like you can tell this game had a higher budget than Atelier games normally have, but maybe not quite high enough to like stick the landing for the story that they were trying to tell.
Like they got lots of interesting premises here, but I felt there's not a lot of it. And also the villains in this game, you only like meet them 3 times in the entire game. Like what?
Yeah,
Like one of
yeah.
the main villains that you meet, it's like oh, you meet them once and you meet them again. Then the next time you meet them, you just kill them.
Also, and I can't say specifically about what, but there's a specific plot point that happens near the latter half of the game that on paper, it's really interesting that deals with Yumia, but the game it it feels weird how the game eventually like comes to its conclusion about it, and I can't say anything more than that. And I think Chow knows what specifically I'm alluding to, but we can't talk about it.
Do you think the gameplay alone is is enough to like kind of hook people in, and where
The
like the story shortcomings coming from seems like?
the synthesis system is good, but my main problem with Yumia's like gameplay is that just frankly, as an open world, it doesn't have nearly enough to do that's different each time. Because like the gameplay loop is basically okay, here's these question marks on the map, go to them and you'll find either a like I don't know, like not an orb, but like a hexahedron or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
And it's like you can activate that to get skill points, and that's something. Or there's a tower that you can activate that turns it into a fast travel point. Or there's a shrine of prayer, which every shrine of prayer is the exact same thing. You get three lights going out directing you to different like pedestals that you need to activate, and the way you activate them is by doing the same mini game you're gonna do like dozens of times throughout the game to either activate those pedestals or to activate zip lines. And I think I would have liked the open world a lot more if there was any more variety in what you were doing for those puzzles or those shrines of prayer. If each time you went to a shrines of prayer you didn't or well, sorry, if each time you went to a shrine of prayer you weren't con- knowing that you were going to be doing the exact same thing, I might have actually have done more of them. Because
I think
once
the
I
main issue is like the more you play it, the more you dislike it. Because by the time you like done the first region, you basically experience all there is
yeah,
to offer
yeah,
with the game.
You know what's coming to mind for me as you talk about this? Forspoken.
Rise of
yeah,
the Ronin.
I hate to say
I
it.
do have that installed. I want to play it.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but that is a really good comparison point to how this open world feels. And that's not a good feeling.
Oh man,
It,
yeah,
it,
we're going okay.
it kind of feels like you're describing developers' first open world game, sort of
Yeah, and the
stuff.
thing that's crazy is those that like Chow, did you play Rise of 3?
Not fully. I only played the introduction, but I know that
Okay.
they were trying to do a more open world kind of scale.
Yeah,
But I,
but the thing with Rise of 3 is that the way that its open zones were designed, which to be fair is not very different from the way that like Yumi's open world is, because each region is basically segmented and there's like a thin path that goes from one to the other for the most part. Uh, Rise of 3's open world open zones felt a lot better because even though there was not really that many puzzles, the way the regions were designed they wrapped in on itself. There was like way more variety in what you were doing and how things looked. And it feels like in a weird sort of way, since they made this be a proper open world, it kind of hamstrung like what they could do with it.
Yeah.
And to
I don't know
be
about you
clear,
guys, but from you go ahead, then I'll go. Then I'll talk.
though, like visually, I think that's not the problem with Yumia's open world. I think visually, especially the second region, is really, really neat. And I could definitely see a world where if they had just done a few small tweaks, it would have been really, really engaging. So I think that the next Yumiya game, which spoiler alert, it's 100% obvious they're going to do the same thing where it's like we are no longer having the thing where Atelier trilogies for each trilogy that each game would be a separate protagonist. It's very clear at the end of this game that Yumiya will return. So
Well, I'm not surprised because it's worked out for them so well with the last trilogy in terms of just series mindshare, having that one character that they can kind of tether to their series to for 5 years or whatever.
yeah. And
But
I
I was
like
gonna just
Lumia. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. Just it's I do know some people were disappointed that we didn't get new protagonists in the Secret trilogy,
right.
and it was just all on Ryza. And it's again, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. I feel like Chow probably feels the same way. So you see that ending, it's like that is very clearly this is the MacGuffin that they're going to focus on in the next game.
yeah, I could see that point of view. I also feel like I don't know. I feel there's some closure that kind of needed. So it's like there's still a lot of plot threads with
Yeah,
just
and like part of that I feel like is tied to that one thing that's kind of weird that they deal with her character in the game, but on the other hand, it feels like they kind of try to say that it's taken care of, and it's weird, but we can't talk about it, so it's just
Brian, what you were gonna say earlier?
I,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's just a tangent. Like I've never really seen like the huge this dividing line or distinction between this is an open map. You can go anywhere from anywhere versus a map with large but segmented zones. Like I think of Monster Hunter Wilds, where it's like they are technically connected, but is anyone actually walking from the wastelands to the forest through like the one narrow
That's
path
my
that connects
primary
them? No,
method to get to hunt. That's it.
yeah,
no,
like
there are
I,
quest NPCs like everywhere. Like, but the quest is like so minor, you probably don't even want to like interact with them, right? They just like fuck like pointless thing. Like this NPC is being attacked by monsters. You save them, you get skill points, or you help them like do some kind of task. I want some healing items. Please give me that. You get some skill points. So there are people out there, but they're kind of feel like they're just tacked on.
It's one of
yeah,
those
I
it's
mean,
one of those
those
things like
sorts of
you design
things.
the game to have this thing, and like you're taking of your development process is with this certain feature by like Monster Hunter Wilds, for example. Your whole development process and the way you design this game is like one of the big selling features like this on all connected world that like you can seamlessly go from map to map. And then so you design a lot of like the technologies and the way that you're implementing them in the game from the technical side around that, just for people to be like, okay, you see it once in the low rank story and never go through those corridors again. So it's like, this getting back to Monster Hunter Wilds, and I won't dwell on it, but it's like one of those things like you really sacrificed probably some element of your resources just for a thing that people will experience once because it's mandatory in the low rank storyline and never interact with it again because they're just going to be teleporting all over the place anyway because that's the most efficient way to get from place to place in that game because you want to do stuff.
I also want
If
to
you tell me
mention this
that
game.
Ryza 3 has like well made, plenty to do, large enough, interesting zones, but are technically disconnected versus Yumia, so you have I don't know if quadrant's the right word, 4 sectors, and they're technically connected, but they're samey and don't have enough to do. Like I know which one of those I'm gonna pick. I'm gonna pick the
It,
segmented one that's better implemented.
it's like think about like guiding lands in Iceborne. It's like different biomes, and you can get to them because they're all relatively close. You're not like you. It's not like an obstacle. Or it doesn't feel like a super waste of time to go travel to them right away because like they're all relatively close to each other instead of like separated, segmented through long corridors. So it's still effectively disconnected. You just want to have that technical tagline of like everything's seamlessly connected. It's like, kinda,
I mean,
sorta. You're not
yeah,
wrong.
that can be good, but it's not inherently better if it's not implemented well.
Yeah.
Anyways, sorry about the Monster Hunter tangent. For me, it's like we haven't talked about Monster Hunter yet. Like, oh wait, yeah, you guys did. My bad. Anyways, sorry, Chow.
Okay. I was gonna say
What do you?
there's one thing I really hate about like doing like story quests in this. It's like, oh, come meet me and talk to me privately in this place, and then your character teleports like 6,000 miles across the map. It's like, do you do you have to do that?
That's trending.
You know what I'm saying?
there's a lot of things where it's like head back to the atelier, and it's like technically you can do synthesis wherever because you have the base building stuff, which I did not
I was gonna
engage
ask
with at
about
all.
that. Like, is the
I
base
did
building like you have to start from scratch every time you enter a new region? Like, I'm confused
no.
how that's
So,
implemented.
so the way it works is that now when you gather items, you also gather materials that are like basically for every category of item, you also get materials connected to that, or almost every category of item.
Okay.
And then you can use those materials, which are separate from your items, which you use for synthesis, to be able to make like furniture or walls or whatever for a base. And the way that the open world is structured is that there's these different pedestals in each zone, which once you get to them, you can interact with them to clear out the mana bound area around so that you don't have any. So this game is obviously not time gated like previous Atelier games were. Instead, what they have, which is kind of, it feels like meant to be like an all like an like a
Progression
fucking
blocker.
Yeah, progression. Well, not even progression blocker. More of like an olive branch to the folks that liked the time limits. Is that when you're in an area that is mana bound, you have this resource called energy, which as you're exploring, it's depleting, and you need to basically either find these flowers to replenish it as you're going through, but also your ultimate goal is to get to one of those pedestals to clear out the mana bound areas so you don't have to worry about your energy anymore when you're exploring that section of the map.
Okay.
I never run out of this energy. That's the thing. I don't
Yeah,
know,
I never
like,
ran out of it once, and it's like even like you can upgrade how much energy you can have, but I never felt like I needed to because it never ever felt like I was in danger of running out.
so I don't know what's the consequences of running out this resource. They just tell you it's bad, and then it's like, okay. But it's like, it's always like there's areas to refill it all over the place. You're just wondering, it's like, should I have to worry about this?
But anyways,
It's like they
base
want the
building, base
constraint in
building.
place, and they don't want to inconvenience you, though.
Yeah, so the base building, it's like here you can make your own base, but the problem is that there's like no real reason to instead of just using like one of the presets because the benefits you get from it is so minuscule. And while there is a lot of options to work with, I feel like until you get to the end of the game, there's not enough options to actually make your base feel that unique. And again, it doesn't really matter. It feels like they made this uh, precisely because the Soisan, the Gus president, really loves survival crafting games. So he's like, oh, let's try and do this. And it doesn't feel like it adds anything to the game at all.
Does that like feed into the base building? Like, I'm still not sure like what the base building serves in the overall purpose, or is it just an aesthetic thing?
It's mostly an aesthetic thing. The main reason why you would want to engage with base building is at all is to make like a forge to like be able to duplicate some of your synthesized equipment or items, or to be able to synthesize like duplicate some of your best like synthesis materials that you found or stuff like that. But that's not base building. And in fact, when you like use presets, that'll say it's a separate thing. Technically, you can also build stuff that's different from that, but it's just I don't know. It's like I enjoyed my time with Yumia, but the more I think about it, the more it's like, man, they've got a lot they need to fix up or polish up for the next game because it's like there's potential here to make something really really special and you can see glimpses of it, but the more you sit back and look at the whole picture, it's like, man, maybe they didn't need to go open world. Maybe they didn't need to have this focus on crafting that obviously took up a lot of development resources when the end result is it doesn't really add anything to the game.
I was like, okay, just auto synthesis. Okay, S rank items. Like, why do I have to use my brain when I
And
can just use the computer?
and that's the thing that's messed up is that the synthesis system in Yumia is really fun, but it doesn't feel as in depth as say something like even Ryza, which was itself not super in depth compared to like synthesis systems of the past, but there was more to engage with at any given time. And the way the synthesis works in Yumia is that since you're it's an open world game, you're just constantly gathering so many materials. You eventually or well, items, you eventually get to the point where it's like you have so many items it's impossible to remember what you exactly have. And at a point like I made a point to not use auto synthesis, but once you get to the end game and you're like have recipes that are like max level 10, you basically have to just be like, okay, let them auto add for synthesis, and then I'll go in and replace stuff to fill in the cracks that the auto synthesis was not able to do. Because otherwise, this takes so long, but it doesn't feel like there's any actual strategizing to it. I don't know.
That feels like very poorly implemented. Yeah, the way that the economy works in that, the way that you're describing it. But yeah, at some point, I'm sure it's all like most people are gonna like just let the game think for me because it's everything feels so bloated.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened with me. It's like I
Mm.
wanted to keep doing everything manually, but the game has so much bloat to it in the first place. It's like I'm not going to force myself because this game, it's funny. Ryza 2 and 3, based off my playtime, were longer in this. Probably if you do everything Yumia, it's going to be longer in Ryza 2. But Ryza 3 was longer than this game for me, not a question. And even though I thought that game was a little bit bloated, in retrospect, it doesn't feel anywhere as bloated as Yumia does, a game that is effectively half its length.
So, now that
So-
you mentioned Rise of 3, I guess one of the big questions that we should probably address is like, how is at least from what you guys played, the state of localization in this game? Because Rise of 3 was infamous.
It is significantly better. I would say that if you were someone that played Rise of 3 and got burned by the localization, I even asked about this when I went to the preview event. It's like, hey, I just brought it up because of the situation with that, and they told me at the time, "Oh, don't worry, we put an extra amount of care into the localization. You shouldn't have any problems." And it's like when you're at a preview event, you kind of it's like, yeah, I'll see for myself once I actually get the full game. Yeah, this game's localization, as far as like Atelier goes, this is probably the best they've done for localization probably ever.
Okay.
I don't have any issues with the quality of the localized text. There might be one or two things if I really like put it under a microscope, like maybe there's a systems text that got slightly mistranslated or something, but I was keeping an eye out for things and I didn't, unlike Rise of 3 where it was incredibly obvious that there was something wrong with the localization. In this case it's like no, there's nothing wrong with the locals, like the localization itself is fine and the text itself reads well, and it seems like yes, they did put extra focus on the localization this time. I don't know how Chow feels about it.
I feel it's fine. I feel like they should start dubbing the series again. I feel like any
Yeah, yeah.
localizations like with a dub, it's like an improvement because they like while they're dubbing, it's like, oh, this sounds kind of unnatural to say, and they could correct it, right?
You say that, but the original release of Ys 8 was also dubbed.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, and then there's also like the problem of dub titles as well. Like it's something that the Yakuza series even had to like Sega went out of their way to correct for, where they have a different set of like subtitles if you're using the Japanese audio versus English voices. So they have dub titles, so they actually do correct the subtitles per audio track in those games. Since,
I
since,
I
since
I
like
will
Yakuza 7, I
say
think.
Yeah, I will say my barometer for the localization is that there's like one line that essentially the final boss says that if anyone is familiar with Japanese, they'll see this one, like they'll hear the Japanese voice line, they'll hear the one specific word he uses, and they'll look at the localization and be like, oh, they didn't fall into that trap where everyone uses the exact same uh, lo- translation for this word when really half the time it does not fit whatsoever, and they actually properly conveyed what the hell he was saying in that one line. It's like, okay,
It
that
can't be helped.
no, it's like
I was thinking of examples.
I'll never I won't I won't forgive you. I won't allow this, that sort of thing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like
Mhm.
that Yurusanai, like they actually properly translated that instead of just falling into that one trap. So it's like when I saw that, it's like the whole game I was like, this feels like the localization is a step up from previous games, and I saw it, it's like, yep, they definitely put more care into this localization.
Since we haven't talked about it yet, a lot of the reason that people like to play these games is obviously for the characters. How's the new cast this time around?
I I like it. I feel like it wouldn't be too fair to Yumiya's cast to say that. Well, what's the best way of putting this? I really liked was it Rutger?
Ruger is my favorite
Yeah,
out of the
it is
six.
very, very obvious, and they'll probably follow up on it in the
Is he
next
the dude
game.
with like the green jacket with the scythe?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's very, very obvious that Rutger is, if anything, probably going to be the love interest throughout the rest of the trilogy, would be my
Mm.
guess. Because there's already, like, even before like a climatic event in the game, like it felt like the interactions that Yumiya has with him in his like side stories are a lot more in depth than the other characters, and it really does stand out. And then something happens in the story that directly draws a parallel between Yumiya and Rutger, which wasn't there before necessarily. And it just and in the story, there's like moments that you see Rutger like actually do and say things. It's like, yeah, it feels like he's meant to be that sort of character. I don't know if Chow feels the same way.
I probably don't see him as a love interest, but I do feel that he has like some plot points that could set up for further things. I think we can actually like talk about it because that's not past that point.
Well, no,
Basically,
if it's about the Yumiya stuff, we can't talk about it, but we can
no,
talk about
but
his stuff. Yeah.
yeah, basically what happened is like they asked him was like why he's acting all kind of like like is it awkward or is it kind of annoyed all the time? It's like because like he's saying that like back then when he was a orphan, somebody came up to him and said, that, "Hey, I'll buy your memories." It's like okay, I'll sell my memories, and after that, it's like he seems to regret it because he always feels like something's missing in his head. It's like
Well, he doesn't say he regrets it because he says like it sucked. I shouldn't have had to have done that, but it was the best option at the time because otherwise the orphan, like him and the other orphans, would have starved.
Yeah, I don't want to get
Uh,
too like into story because obviously no one like
yeah,
has
yeah,
Jazz's
yeah,
game yet
yeah,
as
yeah,
well. Like people want to
yeah.
see this for
The
themselves.
only thing I'll say is that like when I was talking about how I feel like there's a lot of concepts that Yumiya has that had a lot of promise, even if it wasn't fully delivered on. Like the main thing is that obviously the subtitle is Atelier Yumia, the Alchemist of Memories. The way that alchemy works in this game is it is like essentially like fully magic this time. In the
Okay.
sense that the way that the world works is that there's mana and it's kind of like a life stream type deal where mana itself is like imbued with the memories of anything that it used to be. And so the way that alchemy works is that you if you have memories of what something used to be, you can manipulate mana into basically making whatever is connected to that memory. So the way that you find new synthesis recipes is by finding memory crystals in order to get memories of like stuff that was synthesized in the past in the Aldosian Empire, and then that's how you basically figure out your new recipes and you go from there. But in the story, like we said, the whole thing is that memories are also part of your soul because if mana is like your life energy, it's like part of your soul. And if you lose memories, you're losing a part of your soul.
Okay.
It sounds like Kingdom Hearts.
Eh, yeah, I guess, but not in a bad way. I think the whole idea of it, like of how alchemy works in this game, and the idea of like mana and how it like interacts with memories in the soul is interesting. Just it definitely feels like something that they're going to have to expand on a bit more in the future because like with the way things are left, it's like okay, is this thing actually completely done or are they going to go back and do something else with it or so on and so forth. Man, I can't talk about that one story moment like near the end, but it like, the more I think about it, the more weird it feels with how they frame it, but
I feel it's a
that's
missed
for another week.
opportunity. That's what I feel.
Yeah, but
Like
How
I
do you
again,
guys feel about Yumia as a protagonist? Just like personality,
I
characterization,
I think she is
agency, those things.
I think she is good, but unfortunately, with how weird things are with that, like, later story moment, it's kinda hard to say. There's a lot of room for her to grow still, but I don't know how they're like, which direction they're gonna take things. And that's a good thing in one sense. It's like, wow, I don't know what's going to be next, but it's also like with Ryza, you kind of had an idea, like a broad sense of which way she was going by the end of the first game. Um, but I don't really know specifically which way Yumi is going to go, and I feel like a lot of her character development has already possibly happened. Which, I mean, that was the same thing with Ryza, but I don't know. I like Yumia. I like it. I like her as a character, but it definitely feels like a situation where I really need to see how they follow things up on her in the next games before I know for sure how I feel about her, like compared to other series protagonists.
Yeah, it's
It almost
gonna be
makes
hard
me
to go
frustrated.
for it.
Sorry, like frustrated is too negative of a connotation, but it's like, man, like what is this event that happens that contextualizes things? But I've played games where it's like all the story beats independently or even in sequence make sense, or cogent, but only if the outcome happens a certain way. Then the outcome fumbles it, and it's like it almost retroactively recontextualizes things for the worst. But I
I
understand kind of the idea of
yeah,
having
I
to
don't I
have the
don't
final
even
piece in place.
I
Go
don't
ahead.
even necessarily think that they fumbled it per se, because there's still a chance that they can follow up on things. But I'm gonna say something that isn't a spoiler in and of itself, but some people might be able to. Mm, what I'll
How did
say is that when I was at the preview event, Hasoi-san directly told me that for the relationship between Yumi and Flami, that he was inspired by the relationship between Cortana and Master Chief. And when he said that, as someone that has played Halo and is familiar with the story a bit, I was wondering exactly what he meant by that. And let's say I got an answer to that by the end of the game.
Yumia is an AI created construct.
No, no. But
well, I wouldn't want to know either way, but let people
yeah,
see that for
yeah.
themselves, see how they feel about it.
I was
Um,
in a voice chat with a friend of mine last night as I was finishing up, and I was explaining to her like what Hosoi-san had said, and then very briefly what had just happened, and she just started cackling because she's also played the Halo games, and we were both on the same page. It's like, oh my god, that's what he meant.
mm,
I
It's,
did not play Halo, so I don't know where I was going from it. So
I have played
yeah.
Halo, but besides the Yumia being an AI, I don't without playing Yumia, I don't know exactly what you're getting at. But I have I have
um,
a slant maybe that I can kind of consider.
it's gonna be interesting to see how this lands with fans. It's gonna be extremely hard for Lightning to strike twice because Ryza definitely was that revival of the series for a lot of people's eyes and to them, of course. And trying to it's they're very much trying to posture this new mainline series of games in a post Ryza world. So like we already mentioned, like having that singular main character unlike the previous mainline series, and now they're very much like trying to market Yumia as like she's like she's Ryza's successor, she's the new poster girl, and so forth. And we'll see how that it's going to be really difficult for them to really try to follow up on that and try to capture the same success. I guess we haven't really followed up or touched up on this yet, but like you guys mentioned, this is now like a fully action RPG, and like every time I see like videos of the combat, it's like over the shoulder, third person, and I can't tell like how active the combat is versus like what is being done and like being chosen in menu,
I
because like when you view the combat and not playing it, it's hard to parse like what you're actually doing input wise in combat when you're
it's
seeing
like once you
videos of
play
it.
you're
it, it all
spamming.
it's like
It it's even though it's a very different combat system from Rise of 1, it has a very similar issue where it doesn't feel like the items make a lot of sense to use most of the time, and it also doesn't make a lot of sense to switch between your party members, which was very much a problem that Rise of 1 had in both measures. Uh, I've read Chow's reviews, so I know we're on the same page here. This combat system is not good. It is very button spam, like it's very like button spammy, and
it's
Are
so
you
I
are you, are,
stupidly
are you just are you
easy.
just like are you just like mashing normal attack and then like by pressing
you
immediately pressing
have
Look,
like a,
I could tell
a
you that
skill
I could
out of
not
cooldown?
understand most of the mechanics, and I got through every single boss fight or every single fight, no problem, just button mashing. And even the boss kills my characters. I perfect dodge everything. It's like you can't hurt me. I perfect dodge all your attacks. So it's like
yeah. There's that, but also like because of the issues I was having, where it's like it felt like these. Full disclosure, I started off the game on hard difficulty because I wanted to feel like I had a challenge, and then I got to the boss of the second region, and I was like, wait a second, I just instantly demolished them. Guess I need to bump this up to very hard. And even then, once I got to the final boss, and because of how easy it is in any Atelier game to eventually just make broken equipment, I loaded up my entire party with quality level 999 equipment with augmentations on all of my gear with stats, all stats boost plus level 10, and I just went into the final boss, and it's like, man, you can't do anything. You have a lot of health, but you're not hurting me at all. And
Okay, so the last boss gave me a little bit of trouble just because I didn't upgrade any of the gear in the last region because I just want to straight up just go straight to the last boss and just get the story done.
Chow was just like, I'm done with this game. I just want to get it done.
I mean, he was
So I
reviewing
didn't
it,
even-
so-
yeah.
have like basically gear from the last region.
Chow, random question: did you ever find out how to recipe recall bismuthium, or however you pronounce it, the rainbow ingot?
No, I don't know where to find the flower.
Well, not the flower, but the like ore or whatever, because it's like,
Oh, I got the recipe. I got the recipe, but I did not know where to find that flower. I found a flower in a treasure chest from a treasure trove, and then I got the recipe that way. But I couldn't find any extra flowers, so I couldn't really get the
yeah, I
recipe.
definitely ran into an issue where I found the ingot in like a treasure trove, so I got the recipes for that gear, but I was never able to find the other thing I needed to actually recall and synthesize it myself. Yeah, and so then I got to the final region. It's like, okay, well, I know how to make the final region's ingot, so I guess I'm completely skipping the third region's ingot, even though I like looked everywhere to try and find it. I even went to the extra like zone up north, and it's like I just couldn't find it. Just
I
couldn't
forgot
find
to
it.
place a flower.
I don't think it was a flower, but it was like something. It's like I just couldn't
Smells like
find it.
age or something. It looks like a flower to me. It's like I don't know where the hell to find it. It's like at the end of the game, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just make the strongest weapon instead. And for some reason, the strongest weapons have an easier material farm, and they also they require fishing for some reason. Like two of the
Yeah,
ultimate
for some of
weapons.
them, yeah, they require fishing. Yeah.
So which is kind of odd. It is what it is. And I don't know where to find those two fishes to get the strongest spear and the strongest sickle for.
And Chow, you played it on well, yeah, you did play it on PC, so yeah, it might have been a PC bug then. I don't know. But yeah, one thing I'll also mention, I guess, since I brought up we both played it on PC, you said you had crashing issues on your like AMD RDNA 3 GPU. Like you have a 7800 XT, and you had some crashing issues apparently.
Yeah, it usually happens every time when you're in the loading screen. Even when I beat the game, it asks you like, "Hey, do you want to save a clear save file?" It's like, "Okay, save, crash." It's like, okay. It usually happens when you see a loading screen. That's for me, right?
Yeah, thankfully I didn't have any crashes whatsoever, and because I've been over the last like week and a half, I've been at my parents watching their cat while they're out of country. And so I put like 30 hours into the game on my laptop, which is also AMD based, with a 6800M. And I'm looking at the AMD software right now, and it said playtime total 31 hours, and I didn't have a single crash. So
Weird.
I think it's just an RDNA 3 thing. It's not unexpected because Koei Tecmo has definitely had issues with RDNA 3 stuff in the past. Fun fact, they're the reason why I switched my desktop to NVIDIA, because Wo Long and then Wild Hearts both had issues with RDNA 3 cards on Windows. And it was just a situation where once I upgraded my laptop to an AMD laptop, because it was the only one I could get that would have more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM for under $1,000.
Man, if I could only hold out for another 2 years and got the 9070 XT instead.
That seems like it's probably the best card to get if you're not going fully top of the line. But even if you are going fully top of the line, you're not getting a 5090 for anything less than $3,000 anytime soon. So it's like, yeah. But
what can I say?
Yeah, just a tangent. I figured it was worth mentioning because in your review you did mention the crashing issues, and I wanted to stress that it seems like it's not even just AMD. Neither of us obviously have an RDNA 4 card to test, so we don't know if the crashing is also a problem on like a 9070 XT. But on RDNA 2, so like a 6800 XT or 6900 XT or 6700 XT, you should be fine because like the Steam Deck doesn't have any issues, and that's RDNA 2 based, and I haven't had any issues on my laptop, which is again 6800M, which is essentially just the 6700 XT.
I assume generally like the performance is generally all right, and like
Yeah.
has a decent amount of PC options to tweak with.
Yeah, like in my preview, I mentioned it was interesting how it doesn't have DLSS or FSR, but it does have XESS. That's like the one quirk about the port, and I'd say
Okay.
that the port itself is really good.
Okay.
I didn't use keyboard and mouse controls too much, but it has really good keyboard and mouse controls. Like the menus are fully like mouse. You can use the mouse for everything, and even like the little like mini games I was complaining about earlier, you can use the mouse in those mini games, which makes them way easier, way quicker to do.
The mouse controls are good, but there's one thing I do not know how to do with the keyboard. I do not know how to open the house building menu on the keyboard, so I had to go back to the controller.
I think it was like F4 or something.
F4 out of all
Yeah.
buttons. Okay.
Okay.
Something like that, because the thing is that when you're in the base building and it's like, here's the preset menu, normally it says use the I don't know what the name of the button is. The Xbox button that's like 3 lines. It says to use that. And then like I think if you have if you're using keyboard and mouse controls, it'll also let you know which button you need to press for that. And I think it's F4, but if it's not,
Function 4
it'll let
key.
you know. Yeah.
Okay. I did not know because certain times I did try playing on the keyboard because I was like, it's like let me try to use a gun on the keyboard. It's gonna be much easier to aim for shit with a keyboard. So I did that, and I'm like, yeah, this feels great. It's like aiming on a controller, I feel is too sensitive. I had to like lower the sensitivity
Yeah,
down to
yeah.
like 2 before it's like workable. Or else the thing just moves like a fucking mouse with your right analog stick, right?
Yeah, and I'd say the game is well optimized. Like besides like the crashing issues, I'm sure you had no problems like maxing this game out. And it
No, the game runs smooth in my end. I'm sure it's a pretty taxing game, but I can't really say because I didn't have dips. I have heard like different reviewers complain about the performance that this game feels kind of like very demanding and unoptimized for certain players. Because I certain they seem to all have like 3060 cards for some reason. I feel like that's the most common card for in the industry probably from
Yeah,
all
but
the pieces of
the thing is that I wouldn't see how that would like seeing how the game runs on my laptop at 1440p on the high preset, and then then XESS just knocked down to ultra quality plus instead of like native. I put a 60 FPS frame cap because I felt like I was like CPU limited, so I wouldn't go really that much higher above that, and it felt like it made sense just to cap it at 60. And I didn't have any issues with performance on my laptop. Obviously, I'm not even going to talk about like what I played of it on my desktop because that's again no point, even bringing that up. But
Now,
on a
one thing that is worth bringing up is kind of one of the news things for this week as we head into the launch is the demo will be available within a day, probably by the time this podcast is published, just ahead of the release, which does have a Steam demo as well, which sometimes Steam gets skipped, but it'll have a
it's
demo, and it'll be interesting to see like people's, a wider population of people being able to report whether they have performance issues, crashing, and things like that.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, there's gonna be a demo for Atelier Yumia either March 16 or March 17, depending on time zone, for PS5, PS4, Switch, Xbox. I assume that's Xbox Series and Xbox One, and Steam, so all platforms. And then you can take the save data from the demo into the full game. So obviously, this could be like from the very beginning of the game up to a certain point. So if you're interested in checking out a lot of like what James and Chow have been talking about in terms of like the gameplay, make up your own mind. And give it a
I think a lot of Twitter
hands-on.
comments kind of think that it's like, oh, this guy's over leveled, so he probably doesn't know what he's talking about. Or certain people say that the combat is hard in certain reviews because there's a huge difficulty spike, and you're like, and this guy just breezes through it. It's like he surely does not know what he's talking about. It's like,
I mean,
You can't win.
I could totally
Sorry, go ahead.
see that if you don't engage with the synthesis system, especially if you're playing on a harder difficulty, if you'll find like a difficulty spike. But the last couple of bosses of the game, definitely there is a spike. I noticed that, but it wasn't a problem for me because I walked in with a gun that was specifically crafted to kill a god and basically just yeah,
It wasn't a
it,
problem for me because I walked in with a gun.
This reminds me of like the Pro ZD like fighting the final boss after finding all the pine cones or whatever.
that's the funny thing is that I didn't even like do everything. I did like probably a little bit more in Chow, but not that much more. It's just that if you've ever played an Atelier game before, it's very, very easy to realize the loop of, okay, how do I make the most busted equipment imaginable? And then do just that.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
it's
did
definitely a
just that.
series experience thing. Like if you're just
Yeah,
going
and
into this like as a newcomer and you don't
the ever
engage with like with one of the main systems, which is the Atelier alchemy part of it, then yes, definitely feel the difficulty spike because you're
yeah,
not
the ever
engaging
thing.
one of the core pillars of the series.
So basically, the setup I had at the end of the game is I found an accessory that would every time I did a skill, which is every time you attack, because technically your cooldowns are skills, uh, a percentage of the damage you deal will be recovered as health. And I basically got one of those fully maxed out with an augment that just fully buffed it and also reduced my skill cooldowns. And then I got another accessory that its skills were to make it so that your kind of mana burst it extends how long it lasts and makes it so that you lose less of the gauge quickly, but also the longer you're in it, the stronger it gets. And one of the trade-offs for your mana burst is that you can stay in it as long as you want, but as soon as you expend your mana, your environmental mana, you'll start losing HP. But remember how I said that I got an accessory that made it that every time I attacked, I recovered HP. I because of how strong I made my weapon, every single time I attacked, I fully recovered my HP, and it meant that I could just get into the mana burst and just stay there and keep attacking. And then by the end, like at the very end of the final boss, before the like a cutscene like finisher for it, like I did the special mana burst attack, and I ended up doing like for every tick of that attack, and there's like 30 ticks, I think of it. I was doing like 40 to 50,000 damage and recovering 3,000 plus health. And
Yeah, I was not having that experience. I was doing 2 to 200 damage.
yeah, I just found out like, hey, these two accessories seem to synthesize really well together. I'm going to make myself absurdly broken, and then I did.
And that's kind of what that Atelier experience too. So like the system allows for that, like in many Atelier games where you can just like there are it is by design that you make broken shit.
But
Yep.
it's like I
It's
actually did want to see what it's like if you didn't come in with all broken gear, because I feel like the battle system has potential in like during boss fights. I mean, there was like a rotating AOE marker. It's like shit like that. It's like you want to see what they do. But like half the time they just fucking die like in a split second. You don't know what they do, right? It's
Yep.
like I feel the battle system is way too imbalanced. You just level way too quickly, and like the fights are like never ever difficult, right? And random encounter is just like button spammy. It's like, you just press one buttons and they're dead, right? You like you never learn how to actually like play the game for real, right? At least that's my experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a tale of two extremes. It's like it seems like with Atelier, it's like you learn the system in and out, so you learn how to make broken shit organically, or you kind of hit that wall or feel like you're not you're doing piss damage because you you're not making the broken shit. It never seems like you're finding like a middle ground build in these games, you know.
It's one of those things where having perfect balance shouldn't always be a goal. Having a little bit of imbalance is fine. But if you just stumble across being broken without like any thought, or in Chow's case, you're not really that broken, but still you just kind of press buttons and win. Well, I
Mhm.
Yeah,
guess
and to be
well, Chow,
to
what
be
difficulty
fair,
were you playing on?
I'm playing on normal. I play all games
Oh,
on
okay.
normal until I beat it. Then I play on very hard, or unless I'm writing a guide for some reason and I decided to go nightmare first try kind of thing. It'll be like
Ah.
I think the only game that I ever start on like a nightmare first try was Trails to Azure. I actually rolled a guide on that with with no help. Just go straight to nightmare from the get go. 'Cause I want to write what my experience was like trying to beat it, and so if that strategy did not work on Nightmare, then obviously my strategy is completely useless then, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much covers like a good chunk of like what people could expect out of Atelier Yumia. Like both Chow and James are like they feel like it's okay overall. It definitely has some fundamental flaws to it, but it's definitely the start of a new series. So hopefully they can only go up from here and fix some of the core issues that you guys were having with the game. Not to say that it's bad. It's just like they went a different route, and hopefully they learn from their mistakes in installment.
So of course, Chow does have the review up on the site for Atelier Yumia at rpgsite.net. And then we have some companion features that went up at the same time. Mikhail did the comparison between some of the consoles, like Switch and PS4 versus PS5, as well as the Steam Deck ROG Ally article. If you're going to play on a portable PC, what sort of things you can get. And then, of course, the like Josh said, we have the demo will be available within a day or two, depending on your time zone. Um,
I wonder
on
how
all
far they will
platforms.
let you go in a demo. It's like they let you explore the entire first region. It'll be like, oh, it's like you basically got the good chunk of the game then.
Will it even prevent you from is there going to be like an invisible wall preventing you from going further? Because it felt like for yeah, I don't know how that demo is going to be structured. I'm very curious.
So
The
I'm not sure
prologue
about you,
and the early
James.
main quest, pioneering the Lignus region. So,
Ooh,
eh.
So I was gonna say, James, were you one of those kind of players where you have no idea how to reach certain areas and you just chose the way of falling off the cliff to get there? Were you one of
Yeah,
those guys?
yeah.
Okay,
I
guess we're
mean, there
both
was,
in the same boat.
and I found out eventually once you get the bike, it's like you don't even have to worry about your energy because if you're on the bike and you fall, you don't take any fall damage.
God mode. Well, I think that kind of covers us for all the games we wanted to talk about this week. Uh, what else? I guess we'll go straight into news from here. Not a lot in terms of big headline announcements. Like I said, I was kind of out of the loop. I was pretty much off grid for the last couple of weeks. So I had to kind of tee myself back up when I was reading this, getting prepared for the podcast. What I put at the front here was something that Kite kindly translated for us. This was a Nippon Ichi Software
Hold on,
streaming presentation.
we go to this, we did have a Rise of the Ronin PC interview that Mikhail did as well. That's like worth shouting out.
Oh, I
Um,
listed that here and I went right by it. Yeah.
yeah,
I love
he
this interview, especially
yeah,
especially the one coffee question was great.
yeah. Mikhail loves putting out the coffee questions for people who either they don't drink coffee or they say they don't drink coffee and drink tea instead. So he got to interview Yosuke Hayashi, who's the producer and executive vice president at Koei Tecmo, and Fumihiko Yasuda, who's the development producer and head of Team Ninja, on the surrounding the Rise of the Ronin's PC release that released several days ago. After a rocky start, technically, because like the people have been suffering some issues, and Koei Tecmo has already released a statement saying, "Hey, we understand that there's some issues. We hope to get out a patch ASAP, addressing a lot of those issues that people are having." So, that's a shame that like it launched in that state. And obviously, Mikhail wrote up his impressions of the PC port and like how he was having crashing issues on the Steam Deck and all that. But there's a really it's a pretty brief interview because Yasuda and Hayashi kind of gave more brief answers, but it was nice hearing their perspectives about like the 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 closing gap between console and PC gaming in Japan and how like the PC is becoming more of a fundamental platform that more Japanese developers are focusing on as time goes on. We also learned that Yasuda has been playing a lot of Path of Exile 2 throughout in this time, so very interesting to see that that Path of Exile 2 still in early access. Not only having a splash on just the Western player base, but also with some Japanese developers behind the scenes there. So always cool to see, just Japanese developers, playing games on an international scale, not just within their own region, as a lot of people seem to think. It's like no, they play games from anywhere in the world, wherever they're developed.
Mm.
Um, so it's really cool to see especially like Yasuda's insight on the the soundtracks of the Neo games and how uh you know Yasuda's perspective on Inon Zur, who also did the music of Fallout and Starfield, and all that. So it's a really really insightful interview that Mikhail did. Yeah, interviewing one of like some of the biggest names in Japanese development at the moment. Obviously, coming not just from Team Ninja, um, but uh, beyond Rise of the Ronin, they're also going to have Ninja Gaiden 4 sometime this year. So it's going to be cool to see, how where they go from here. What where their experiences lead them with Ninja Gaiden 4 as they co-develop it with Platinum.
Mhm. And I kind of already mentioned this in passing, but I'm really eager to play Rise of the Ronin. 'Cause even though Wolong didn't quite land for me, I do like their Neo team's work. And I know
Mhm.
Wolong was kind of like the I hate using the term B team, but it was like a younger team that worked on that one.
Yeah.
So and then Rise of the Ronin was again kind of similar to Yumia in a kind of small way by going the more open route rather than the more like zone level based route. So see how that is implemented in that
Yeah,
game.
yeah. We just have to hear from you whenever you get around to that game.
Mm. And then also before we go back to the news, Adam, did you want to talk about the game that you had kind of played out of your backlog over the last couple days?
I can spend like 60 seconds on it.
Sure, go do
So
it.
I played
Take it,
System
you do it.
Shock. I played System Shock, the remake that was released in 2023. It's
Mhm.
one of those games I kind of had been interested in a while, and I just hadn't gotten around to it. And this is a good opportunity to just kind of how the release schedule and other schedules lined up. So so System Shock released in what 1994, the original version, and it basically eventually was kind of a precursor to things like Bioshock after that, right? And System Shock 2, of course. This was a remake from Night Dive, who's I feel like Night Dive has been pretty busy recently. They've done a lot of different remasters and remakes and new ports and things like that in the last couple of years. Um, but this was one of their bigger projects, being the full remake of System Shock. I've never played the original System Shock, and from what I understand, this is a pretty faithful remake in that a lot of the quirks were maintained. But it is a from the ground up remake. Um, it had a Kickstarter campaign way back in the day. Uh, took it took a long time for this game to release, and then even longer for it to come out on consoles. It's kind of this like first person, slightly survival horror, slightly immersive sim, even very slightly Metrovania type of game. It's got a pretty cool visual style. It took me like an hour to kind of get used to it because it's very loud, very cybernetic, very neon colors. Trying to figure out like what's interactable and what's just a texture on the wall, things like that. But once I kind of got used to it, I do like how this game looks. And it's got like, so I grew up, and Brian would know, I kind of grew up as a DOS gamer, like PC gaming back in the 90s. And even though I never
Mhm.
played the original version of System Shock, playing this kind of takes me back to that era in
Yeah.
a way. It has like just kind of that vibe, that feel. I don't know if you agree at all, Brian, but
No,
it's
I kind of get that. Yeah.
yeah, and it's kind of a cool game. I do feel like I spent half my time managing my inventory because you get like so it's a first person shooter, but you get like 8 or more different weapon types that all take different ammo, and some you don't get a lot of room to hold it all. So a lot of the game is just kind of managing your weapons, your loadout, your ammo. It does have that sort of resource management component to it, and I think it feels like kind of inevitably the way the game is designed, you end up kind of picking a room in the game, just one room, just pick a room, any room, and you just start like dumping stuff in there. Like, all right, I got all my weapons. I can't carry all of them, so I'm just gonna go into this room and just kind of lay them out on the floor here, so I can come back and pick them up later if I want. Um, and things like I don't need this much health on me right now, like health packs and things like that. But I might need them later, so I'm gonna kind of collect them and drop them off all in here. So I had this little like base that I created. No base building systems, to be clear. Just a bunch of resources and junk. I just kind of started dumping in our room. Did you do that too, Brian? I imagine that's probably
Yeah.
pretty
No.
common.
Yeah, and one piece of context is ammo you have to make room in your inventory for. It's not just a
Yes.
number on a menu. You've gotta hold on to it. And like you said, a lot of different ammo types for different guns. And you can't just say like, well, I only like shotguns. I'm only gonna grab the shotgun ammo because you probably won't have enough.
No, you're
Like
gonna run out.
you have to. Yeah, and that's one of those things that I always harp on, where it inconveniences you in a good way. Where you're like, I really like the shotgun, but I don't have enough shotgun ammo to just use that exclusively, so I have to get the EMP gun. I don't remember what the
Actually,
guns
kind
are.
of the opposite for me. I wasn't a big fan of the shotgun, but when you when you eventually get to a point where you do have a lot of shotgun ammo, he's like, well, I gotta use this, so guess I'm using the shotgun now. So this isn't like a Doom or other classic or full first person games where you can just pick the gun you like for sure.
Speaking of Doom, like one thing I am interested in trying, this is how much of a fossil I am, is I do want to play that Night Dive Doom 1 plus Doom 2, like actual, like I don't know what the right term is. It's not emulated. It's like
Oh, it's not the one that
not
recently released, the newest release of.
yeah.
Okay,
It's
yeah, those are
yeah, and I
fascinating.
don't know how to like the way that was marketed, and I see that the reviews are overwhelmingly positive. Is that it's like as faithful as you can get to the original Doom without compromising it, with like making it work on modern systems and modern resolutions without like refiltering it or emulating it. Like I would like if you want to play the original Doom 1 and Doom 2, it seems like the best way to do it
Yeah,
these
those
days.
seem
Like
really cool.
I actually forgot that
yeah.
Night Dive was on that, but sure enough, they are.
They do a lot of that stuff. Let me
They've
just
been
like
an
pull up
incredible studio.
their
Didn't they do the
Wikipedia.
recently like the Thing remastered or remake as
Yeah, they
well?
did the Thing remastered. They did Star Wars Dark Forces, which is sort of like Star Wars
Yeah.
Wolfenstein. uh,
Mhm.
like last year, like maybe a
They do
year ago,
such incredible work.
and then they
Yeah.
did like Turok. One of the Turoks they did. They've done a lot. So
Yeah. I thought it was
I'm actually going through
incredible.
their. Oh yeah, Killing Time. I'm not very familiar with Killing Time, but that was just last fall. Not too long ago, they did a Blade Runner game, yeah, and then they did like a couple of the classic Turok games. Uh, yeah, they've done a lot recently. So,
So cool. So cool.
and then they're coming out with System Shock 2 remastered soon.
Yeah, so this isn't a full-on remake for the
Yeah,
System Shock 2.
I
That's
think
not
they
a
basically
remake.
said that System Shock, that game, I think you can still get the classic version, but that game they felt like it needed the remake treatment, whereas System Shock 2 came out in 1999. Like, they think the remaster is kind of good enough, like doesn't need quite the full-on from the ground up remake.
That'd be interesting. I remember having a lot of great memories of System Shock 2, but it's been a long time since I replayed it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember loving it.
I will say that having played System Shock after some of the things it inspired, I definitely get more of a modern System Shock feel from things like, and I say modern, even though it's 8, 9 years old at this point, Prey versus like
Mhm.
Bioshock. Bioshock really feels kind of different, but Prey to me felt a little bit more like System Shock. Still not quite the same, but I got more of the same like genre vibes between
Right.
those
So,
two
somewhat
games
like a
than I
spiritual
did.
successor in a
Yeah,
sense. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, pretty awesome game, not too long. One last question, because I know we said we were going to spend 60 seconds on this. The final boss, because when I played it, it was
Oh yeah.
terrible. And then people were just like, oh yeah, that's just how it is. Don't worry about it. It's faithfully bad. Don't worry about it. But I know that they like updated it. And like, I don't know, like, obviously I only played it prior to update. You only played it after update. So we can put our
I don't know what it was like
collective
before.
experience together. But was it bad, I guess?
Okay, so the thing about the final boss that's kind of commits a cardinal sin, where the cardinal sin is boss design or just really gameplay design that takes out everything that the game has been up to that point and then just changes it. Like for like how the game mechanics work. You see this sometimes in various games where it's like this boss has like systems in place that don't work like anything else in the game anywhere and then doesn't return to it at all. So you get to fight Shodan, who's the rogue AI boss of this game. And the thing is it like takes place in cyberspace. So it doesn't use any of like the weapons or ammo or gameplay that you play through most of the station with, but it also doesn't use the normal cyberspace mechanics that you normally have when you're doing like those different little levels throughout the game. So it's kind of like you get to the final boss and it's like, surprise, here's a new sort of mechanic system to kind of figure out right at the very end of the game. And it's like, whoa, what is this? So it does that, and I consider that a kind of a cardinal sin. But I think they might have made it so like the boss has checkpoints in some regard. So if you lose all of your health or integrity in the boss fight, you don't have to start over from the very beginning. I think I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, well, I'll have to remind myself at some point later what they actually changed.
Uh,
And like I didn't mind that it was bad. Like so the final boss was kind of a stinker. Oh well, the rest of the game was great.
I mean, I kind of didn't. It took me a while to figure out what I was doing, but even then, I was able to succeed. So it must have not have been that hard. If I sort of expected going into it, like, okay, the first time I try this, I'm going to fail, but I'm going to kind of figure out how it works, and then I'll kind of eventually get it. But no, I beat it on my first try, even not really knowing what I was doing. So it was easy enough where I could kind of approach it, kind of unsure what I was doing, but still win without having to like reset. But anyways, I actually went back and looked up like last year. So this System Shock came out in 2023, the remake. Last year it came out for consoles. It came out for consoles later, and at that time, that's when they also updated it, kind of a all-in-one sort of deal. And I was actually going through the patch notes that they had last year, and there's a bunch of just small little like behaviors and progression blockers and glitches that are fixed and things like that. It's like, oh, okay, so a year after launch, they did tune up a bunch of stuff and they added a bunch of stuff. And just for fun, like I actually did play as the female hacker that they added. Doesn't do anything. It's just kind of an aesthetic, but that was something they added that wasn't in the original. So
yeah,
the hacker is the main character, by the way.
Was there any voice acting in the remake?
Besides your character kind of making grunt sounds when you jump and dash and stuff, no. I mean, well, there's voice acting. Sorry, there's voice acting from the like showdown and like the audio logs you get, but your main character doesn't talk.
Okay. All right.
Okay, with the Rise of the Ronin interview and Adam's experience revisiting, or not revisiting, but going back to 2023's remake of System Shock, we'll head into the news section of this podcast. So not a ton this week, but I did put up something here that was that I thought seemed like the most interesting out of the headlines. This is a big, I don't know, undertaking by Kite, who translates a lot of Japanese press for us. This is from Nippon Ichi Software. They had a streaming event called Untitled, which I am not familiar with, but I guess it's a semi-regular, direct style podcast where they talk about upcoming, things they're working on, what their teams are
This is
doing.
definitely not something they've ever done. This is like kind of the first time they've done this.
Okay. I was like, I'm not familiar with this, but it doesn't mean it hasn't been around a long time. But okay, so this is a new initiative for them. So they basically touched on 6 titles that are in development that are slated to release. I think all 6 are either like this year or next year, like in mid development, and some of them are slated to come out this year. So the way that Kite kind of framed this, and we have this up on our produce site, all of the translated work and the bulleted like details about what they talked about. Kite kind of picked out 3 that fit kind of our site scope, RPG adjacent titles, or titles that we've kind of covered, games from that same pedigree in the past. And I'll talk more about what I mean by that in a moment, and as well as the other titles that they talked about, because Nippon Ichi, they have a wide breadth of genres and game types that they publish and develop. So just kind of go through the list here. The first one that they talked about, I don't know, I shouldn't say the first one. The first one that we have listed, a game called Curse, which is a dungeon crawling RPG. And it seems like it's basically, it's hard to talk about like what this sets itself aside from like Etrian Odyssey or Grimrock or those other sorts of first person dungeon crawlers. The only media here is like some concept art for this, but the game is slated to release on all consoles, not all consoles, PS4, PS5, and Switch this year. But my understanding about the way that Kite has summarized this, it's a 2-hour streaming event. I have not watched the VOD. Is that it seems like it has like a attrition mechanics where your player can get cursed, and how you deal with those curses during the time of your dungeon diving, and how you like counteract those or your countermeasures they have against those. So long-term debuffs that you can kind of inflict upon yourself to potentially like improve your reward or your output of in some way.
So how they're basically describing this game, and this is like all only for Japan so far. They haven't really, obviously Nisa
Right.
hasn't commented on any of these, so this is all just for Japan so far. Probably a good chunk of them will get localized, but not all of them. But like the way that they described it is that it's like a dark dungeon RPG and there's a variety of like classes. They revealed like standard ones like fighter, barbarian, sorcerer, paladin, archer. There's gonna be more classes, and like you go dungeon dive into like these dungeons, and you accrue curses that you said, of course, will debuff your party, but you can actually just go back to the surface, and like when you purify those curses, you'll actually get like bonus buffs or stats or like things that you can turn those purified curses into like something that strengthens you. So you're intentionally debuffing or collecting these curses to dive back out and purify them to become stronger, which is an interesting concept, like risk versus rewards. How much do I want to risk this run to potentially get like something like a big reward if I'm able to make it out? Like you said, like a lot of these, they didn't show like any like concrete like in-game like video or screenshots. There's a lot of concept art because a lot of these are deep in development. They're not ready to show anything publicly right now. It's kind of an interesting of how they did this because this reminds me of like what Idea Factory did several months ago when leadership changed over there. So they actually gave us like a roadmap of like all the different projects that they're working on. Not to say that like leadership has like fundamentally shifted at Nippon Ichi Software, but like it's similar to like when Marvel is announcing their next phase of like films, so they like lay out like a roadmap, like here are the films that we're going to be tackling over the next few years. Very similar to what Idea Factory and NISA are doing here. Like here's a roadmap of all like not all, but like very much a good chunk of what we're working on. So there's not like any like crazy left field surprises like, oh, it's cool, like Nice is like in a healthy spot. Like they're tackling on not just like they're tackling on a lot of new IPs, and we stress this a lot about Nice development, where they're like one of the most prominent Japanese developers that like consistently tackles new IPs. They don't really lean heavily on like sequels, like say like Capcom does, for example. So it's always cool to see. I want to root for them, but obviously, not because of the risk of developing new IPs. Not all of them are always going to be hits. Some of them are going to be more experimental. Some of them may not like land, etc. So yeah, just
It
like
is kind of a breath of fresh
establishing.
air just to be
Yeah.
like, yeah, we have these studios that we're partnered with, and these are the projects they're working on, and here is unglamorous, like in process work we're doing, like
Yeah,
very
it's cool.
candid and very kind of open. It's
Yeah.
not as like bombastic as like here's a vertical slice trailer from a game we've been working on for 8 years, sort of thing. But I kind of like it all the same.
I
Mhm.
Yeah, it was very fascinating to catch like the tail end of the stream and see a bunch of these games. I'm interested in some of them. It's very very funny though how Renzu is just straight up. They just stole like Spirit Hunter. That's just Spirit Hunter.
So
Yeah,
yeah, we've only talked we talked about Curse. Yeah, the second one, Renzu. Um, Kite had a summary here, a horror visual novel slated for release in summer 2025, so only a few months away.
yeah, that's PS5, PS4, Switch in Japan. Not an RPG, but like as James said, it's very much like in that Spirit Hunter vein, where like it's very uh, centered around curses, centered around like your protagonist is this journalist reporter for the cult magazine, and exploring the urban legends and rumors and whatnot, which is not too far away
Even
from the Spirit Hunter premise.
yeah, not too far away from Deathmark. It's
Yeah,
very, and then you look at like these small glimpses of gameplay we got, and it's like that's just Spirit Hunter. That's just Spirit. You just stole Spirit Hunter.
yeah. So we'll see what their spin on it is, but it's a cool it's cool what they've shown nonetheless. So we'll see how they
Yeah.
handle that. The next RPG that Kite didn't list this Renzu's RPG, but the next one he listed after Curse was Kyoran, codenamed Kyouran, which is he says is Kite's translation for that is misfortunate chaos. He describes that as an action RPG coming to PS5 and Switch, slated for next year in Japan. Um, Kite mentions that this is the one that has the most profound relation to the Disgaea series. Disgaea is the moneymaker for Nice. It includes the character designer Takehito Harada and Tenpei Sato as the composer. Shunsei Minoa also worked on Disgaea 7, is in charge of the game's development team. Um, And he kind of goes on to mention how there's other like gameplay systems in Kyouran that is very reminiscent of this guy, especially like the inflated stat values that they're posturing for this upcoming action RPG. So we'll see how that goes. They released like some concept art of like the main character, which is definitely looks like someone out of this
Yeah,
guy.
I was gonna like I don't want to be like, oh, they all we talked about this
He
with
looks like a
100
handsome
line.
Squidward. He looks like a handsome Squidward version of the Disgaea 5 protagonist.
That's definitely a way to describe it. Yes, but it's definitely emblematic of Harada's style for sure. You can definitely see the Harada, this guy lineage is definitely flowing in the visual style of this game, based on like the concept art that they showed so far. So we'll see how this, it's still far off, still sometime next year. See how that works out. Um, People who are fans of like the what do you call this series, like the Liar Prince, the Blind Prince, and the Firefly Diary. I forget if they have the Gobble is the one I'm talking about. Side-scrolling action game. This was conceived by an employee in their second year at
Oh right,
Nice.
yeah, that one, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's like born from like a competition, the Nippon Ichi Project Festival. Um, that and this follows a similar lineage to like um other titles like Yomawari and Liar Princess and the Blind Prince, who came out of that Nippon Ichi Project Festival, like sort of the creation of those titles, getting them greenlighted. And this is about a protagonist who encounters a talking sickle during a sudden monster attack. Um, the Nippon Ichi has said like the key mechanic in this game is consuming defeated enemies through predation. So and the sickle can steal like the enemies that it consumes. So it's sort of like
Mighty Number 9?
I don't know. I wouldn't say that. It's not like Mighty Number Nine's like the only game that's done like sort of like, hey, your weapon powers up by defeating enemies and feeding on them. Like I think of like Shinobi on PS2 for example. And the style of the game that they have shown through that stream is like sort of like American comic style events. And you see some illustrations on Gamatsu's article right up. So I didn't mean to throw you off on that because I got thrown off by the way it was
I mean, yeah, it's
describing it.
natural when we're talking about a event that talked about 6 games, and we're kind of assigning arbitrary preference ordering to them based on genre, even though genres are pretty loose, So it
Looking at
happens
the
always.
looking at the actual screenshots from the live stream on the Gamatsu article, I was completely right. Yeah, Renzu just straight up is like legitimately a Def Mark clone. It's even got the grid. Oh my god. What are you guys doing over there?
So James was mentioning earlier, the third RPG that Kite listed as like part of like the RPG titles that they mentioned on the live stream is Shinigami Hime, and this is like the third installment following the Liar Princess and the Blind Prince and the Cruel King and the Great Hero games. Um, this is like the next like installment of those. This comes from Sayaka Oda as the character designer returning from those games, and then planning scenario is Kento Jobana, who did Barstella Abyss and Process Nation.
Uh
Um,
Giovanna also did Disgaea 7 and Phantom Brave the Lost Hero.
okay, nice. So, and then like the prior titles, this starts like the main two characters are a monster and a human. And then this title focuses on young girls suffering from trauma whose altered picture book worlds are housed within a strange library. So players in this upcoming title coming in 2026 in Japan, we'll see how when it comes to the West. Players are collecting memory fragments scattered throughout a picture book. So people who like those previous titles with Liar Princess and the Cruel King are this upcoming game is definitely within that emblematic style. Um, that obviously didn't have any like footage to show off, just some concept art. So that's cool to see that series of games is still alive and healthy and getting more
Mhm.
support in the future. Other than that, there's other ones that unfortunately will never get localized unless a fan translation comes out because they Nice announced a new installment to the Furaiki series, and the Furaiki games are motorcycle travel based visual novel. And they're very the series is very popular in Japan because that people really like the way that it depicts real life locations in Japan, and generally like the writing and the characters, the routes, the different girls that you meet in these games. I know people who've acquaintances that played through these games and can't praise them enough. So they announced Furaiki 5, which was interesting because they were very iffy on like whether the Furaiki series was going to continue because it seems like they disbanded like that development team after Furaiki 4, but it seems like some of the key staff are coming back, but I don't know what the actual staff of the Furaiki 5 is composed of. Um, and they're also releasing the first Furaiki game onto Steam, but only in Japan or only supporting Japanese text uh, as well. So it's one of those games that like I wish would get localized, but I don't know how well. It's probably not commercially viable in the West, unfortunately, because it's very much for a very niche audience, and I don't think I can't imagine it's worth it.
It's also really striking that pretty much nothing besides that port of the original Furaiki, nothing that they announced is coming out on PC.
Yeah,
Even though it's like we've had devs, we were talking about the Rise of the Ronin interview earlier, where like Koei Tecmo themselves said, "Yeah, no, PC player base in Japan is a big deal now," and it's like
yeah.
I don't know. It
I
feels
sort
like
of-
the type. It feels like the type of games that NIS releases would have an audience on PC, but they just
I
and it
wonder if it's
makes
like one of those things that's like they release the console versions first, and there's just some process, internal process. Like the PC will come later when it gets localized into the web.
the problem is though is that like NIS like America, they like I've had like employees at NIS America kind of complain about the fact that it makes their lives more difficult when there's not already a PC version because like obviously for them they need to release stuff on PC.
Yeah, I can believe that for sure. So yeah, I really wonder if there's just like some sort of like the way they of course I can't comment. I don't work for them. I don't know what the internal process is like, but I just wonder if like there's just like some stipulation between the main Japanese branch and the Western branch is saying, hey, these will come to PC when like it's when the global version is releasing. So obviously that makes life harder for someone in the ranks to be like, okay, well we have to build a PC port from the ground up then for global release, which is frustrating, but.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of all the things that I almost said Nice America. NIS, like Josh said, this is only from the Japanese side right now. Upcoming projects slated to release in Japan this year and next. A few that are RPG, several that are RPG adjacent. Um, yeah. A few other trailers that released this week. The one that I put as, the biggest one is actually probably the least important as a trailer, but probably has the most discussion behind it. This is for the upcoming worldwide release for Trails in the Sky, first chapter. I guess is it the first in Japan and first
Yeah, it's the
chapter
first
in
in
the West?
Japan. Yep.
Yeah. So this is for the complete remake of the first entry of the Kiseki Legend of Heroes Trail series. And this is all about voice cast. So it's a short trailer that doesn't actually have any voiceover, but it goes through the VAs and comparably on the
I
Japanese
have
side,
to
the
say,
seiyuu.
it is a bummer that they do this, where you have a voice cast trailer, but you don't get to hear any samples of the
None
voices.
of the voices,
Come
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
No, there is one little sample in the second short trailer. There's like Legend of Heroes, or they said they
Great.
said the right.
Thanks, Chow. Yeah,
That's
a
all you
very
get.
small sample of one character saying the title. Great.
Yes.
So the interesting thing here is that in English, I think they got is it everyone back or most people back?
Most people
Which of
back,
course,
yeah.
which ones? What's the exception? Do we know?
You don't get the same Zin voice. You get the new
Okay.
one, which is, I think it's a
But Zin's
downgrade.
been voiced in like
Yeah.
the
Well,
more
also,
recent
I think
games.
like the original like Olivier was Troy Baker.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, really?
Oh
And now it's
yeah,
Matt
yeah, yeah.
and
Mercer.
he was replaced by Matt Mercer later, and now Matt Mercer's the voice.
Yeah, so but it's weird because weird's not the right word, but obviously originally they just had a few
Battle
voice
marks,
lines.
right?
That yeah, effectively. But they had at the time, 2000, what was it, 7, 6? Because it was 2004 in Japan, and then a few years later for the PSP version in the West. Where they got like Stephanie Sheh and Johnny Young Bosch, which are not huge names now, but were bigger names at the time to do the battle barks, and they still are the voice cast for Josh and Estelle. And they got Gung Ho, obviously a different publisher from both Xseed or NIS America, but they got the voice cast back, and that's in the middle of a SAG-AFTRA strike too. Which obviously I don't keep tabs on who's in, which of these voice actors are based in Texas, which are based in LA, things like that. But then on the Japanese side, which I can't speak to other than the lead here, most of the cast is actually different, which is a bit unusual for Japanese
They
Yeah.
only
series.
got
Or
two
more.
returning ones.
Yeah, the thing that gets me is that like Scheherazade is not returning, which tells me we are never seeing her in a mainline Trails game ever again. Like going
You think
forward,
so?
because like one of my main complaints with Reverie was how they kind of like the weird way they treated Shara. Like basically like at least in the Japanese version, like only really referring to her as Olivier's wife.
I can see
And
that. Yeah.
So it's like now I'm like, oh man, does this voice cast change mean that she's just never gonna show up as a playable character again? Because that's the read I'm getting, and that doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
speculation's obviously not known for sure, but I do kind of share your opinion about how they, brought her back in Reverie, but in that context.
So yeah, so for people who don't know, like the only returning Japanese seiyuu for the Trails of the Sky first chapter remake is Olivier's, which is Takehito Koyasu, very very iconic voice. Most people will recognize him as Dio from the JoJo anime.
And he also voiced one
he's-
of the villains in Atelier Yumia. That
he
we
has
didn't get to talk too much about.
Koyasu has voiced fucking everything. Koyasu is
Yes, he's
still
in
very he is an eternal force of energy in Japan for many years. And Zin's seiyuu is the same as Tetsu Inada. Once again, also a very very popular seiyuu over there. Aside from them, everyone else has changed. It's some of them are a lot of new blood, like Garrus, for example, is Chika Anzai, very very prominent seiyuu.
I love her. I think she's like one of the best. But like when she first started, everyone's kind of comparing her to like Hanakana, saying, "Oh, she sounds just like her. It's like a
No.
cheaper," but she kind of stand out on her own and probably superior. Like if you see like the new ReZero
Yeah,
season.
so people will, in anime will know her as Chisato from Licorice Recoil, one of the main characters there. Chisei from Gridman, also a popular main character from there. She's just had a lot of anime roles. Just a very 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 talented seiyuu. The one that caught my eye was Hina Yomiya for
Yeah,
Chloe.
you know what? If you ever heard her voice, I feel like she sounds exactly like Reina Ueda. I cannot tell the two apart. So
For me, it's just like I'm on my Maigo and Ave Mujika arc right now. So her being Tamori from Maigo is like, oh my god, But obviously, she's done many other roles besides that, up and coming talent. But it's just like it.
I get
There's
why they're being replaced, in my opinion. I feel like if they're gonna like remake like all the games and all like the current actors and actresses are probably in their 40 to 60s, it's like,
Yeah, for
are they
me it's
gonna be
like
there?
yeah. For me, it's not yeah. If they're gonna do this whole like how remakes of other games, they need like characters that like can still are still active in the industry, right? And a lot of the older seiyuu are up there in years. It's gonna be hard to reproduce the iconic lines that they're getting up there in years. So I understand that. Like even stuff like there's been voice actor changes between like the JoJo fighting game, that from CyberConnect 2 and the JoJo anime series, and it's because some of those talents, probably like didn't fit their character, and they plan to support the anime for many, many, many years. So they need to have those characters, be at events, be active, and this would be the perfect time to get a new voice cast if they're just like remaking it. So I understand, why
I
most of
even
those
hear
voice
like
casts are
the
changed.
Japanese cast are pretty disappointed, like because they're still kind of active. Like for Stella and Joshua's like voice actors, they're like,
Mhm.
oh, it's like, oh, I see. I guess I wasn't part of that's a bit sad.
I
You
mean,
know?
yeah, obviously it sucks, for people who like got used to those voices or are very big fans of them. This would be the time to do it, if they're gonna do it, and it's understandable. Now I'm like left in the decision, like, do I do the English cast or the Japanese cast for my
I'm gonna
playthrough
play
of
with a
this?
Japanese cast. I don't really care about the English cast on the first one because they only do battle lines. You really don't really know much of what they do as
Well,
a
they're gonna
performance.
be fully voiced now, so I
I
mean,
know, it's like and when you play Cold Steel 4, they come in as appearance. It felt like they're just reading a script because they don't know anything about these characters after coming back like 20 years. That's how I feel, right? It feels
mm,
like they're just talking a bunch of random like mumbo jumbo, right?
mm,
At least
fair.
that's how my take about
Yeah,
it, right?
that's fine. Yeah. So yeah, I might do Japanese voice cast because I'm really interested to see like how this new cast fits in with their characters, how custom they are. Like,
They've been slowly transitioning to like different voices, like in the Cold Steel games. Like when Ren returned, it's like she got replaced by Aoyuki in, for
yeah,
example, right? So they've been slowly trying to shift like newer casts. But
that's
this
gonna be
is
an interesting one when they remake second chapter. Assuming they remake second chapter, that's when Ren gets introduced along with a whole bunch of other characters. See if there's any big like voice cast changes over there when they get
I'm sure they're
introduced.
gonna keep the current one, which is Aoyuki.
I mean, they're definitely gonna keep Ayuki for Ren for sure, 10,000%. They're not
It's,
gonna replace her.
I'm
But
so
some of the
glad
other
that I got a
ones,
new voice for Tita. I do not like her OG Japanese voice at one bit. I feel she is miscast and everything, and I absolutely despise
yeah,
that
she
one.
does kind of sound off in the
I
original
don't think
Japanese
it's possible to
voice.
be miscast in everything. Like,
Yeah.
miscast in everything is kind of an oxymoron. That means they just are bad. I don't even know
I
this
don't know.
person.
I see her like every
Uh,
anime, and I would dislike this character from the get go. She
I
was
I can think of a few English voices like that, like
Rise
Gilbert
Pit
Gottfried,
Book
if
Bro.
he was voiced, like, oh,
Right.
he's been. But then again, no, he's perfect for Yago. So there you go. Never mind. I take it back.
For who? Oh.
Uh,
I'm talking about like Disney animation at this point. I'm a
Okay.
tangent. I'm a tangent. My bad.
But usually a miscast is like a
Rest in
great
peace.
actor just in the wrong role. But if you're
Yeah.
wrong in every role, then are you a great actor
Well,
anymore? So
I'll be honest. I think Johnny Young Bosch is a little bit of a miscast for Joshua. Like I think his voice is almost like too deep. But I guess I don't
I
know what
think
he's
Johnny
pretty
Young
Japanese
Bosch
voice
is
sounds
actually
like.
better as like an anti-hero or villain, personally.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you. Yeah, like even the new DMC anime coming on Netflix, like JYV is doing Dante's voice in that, and like it's hard for me to get used to his voice because it's like for me it's like I feel like it's a mismatch. But maybe it's good. I don't know. But whenever I hear the trailers, I'm like I can't get used to it. I don't know. JYV is cool though. He is cool.
Yeah, no, he's a good dude, and he's done a lot of he's done a lot of roles where he's perfectly cast. So
Yeah, I
but
don't
yeah,
hate him. I don't think anybody. I would say I just say that I dislike the Tito's Japanese voice, and that includes a lot of other shows I watched before
I
she
feel this.
starred.
I feel the same for Pappenbrook. So there you
So
go.
so hopefully they eventually release a trailer for both of these that actually have like voice lines that we can
Mhm.
hear from them. That'd be great. Instead of like we're announcing it. Do we have samples? No, we're just announcing the names. Great, awesome. But it was enough to get a lot of talk, obviously, especially from the Japanese side. Um,
Mhm.
with the big recast throughout the. And it's just for the main cast. It's not even talking about the secondary cast as well, which obviously all of these games have big secondary casts. So I'm interested to see like who else got recasted aside from the main cast in these games.
Who voices Anton?
Who
That's
voices
exact.
Respin?
Mm-hmm. Who voices the photography, the Dorothy?
Oh
Well,
yeah,
Oh wait,
actually,
they had to replace
Neil.
Neil because his
Yeah.
Japanese voice actor
Mhm.
died.
well,
So
actually, Richard, does he have an English voice in like any other media?
I
Because
don't
he's not
know.
shown up again.
oh wait, he's playable in the third. And did they
But
dub the
Oh,
third? I don't remember.
Well, so then there'd be battle barks. So yeah, who did Richard's battle barks in the third? I don't know, because he's a good character that I'm surprised we haven't seen more of.
Who
at
does
least
those
from what I've
three?
been told about.
The three. I haven't played some of the later games, so maybe these characters showed up. But the three like blue-haired bandit people.
Oh
The
They
yeah,
don't.
The
They
Kapua
don't.
family.
Yeah, the
That just shows up a
Capuas.
little
Who
before.
plays that? Who
Does
voices
that?
them?
Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of questions that need answers that we'll find out when Tales of the Sky first chapter releases this fall.
I'm also
And-
curious, like, how much are
Worldwide.
they gonna voice? Are they gonna like redub the entire main story just like the Evo games, or are they just gonna like voice like a couple of voice bits because they don't have the
I'm.
budget? Because
Well,
you're like
that's a
playing
good thing to
Daybreak
bring
where
up.
everyone just talk like a few lines and and they're like silent again. It's like, oh, they ran out of money again. It's
The
like,
weird thing about Daybreak and Daybreak 2 is like you'll have the whole cast, and I know we're not talking about those games, but I'm curious what tack they'll take for the first chapter. Is you'll have the whole cast speaking with no voiceover, but then a new character will enter the scene and their lines will be voiced, interspersed between the cast is not like there's Daybreak 2, the Arkwright Solutions team is talking with no voice, and Shizune shows up and she's voiced, and then the rest of the team is not voiced, but she's still
Yeah.
voiced, and it's very strange.
Even
And
yeah.
I hope
East 10 had a
yeah.
little bit of
And that's just
this.
one example. Yeah, East does that as well. That's one thing that I think that Xseed for Cold Seal 1 and 2 really tried their damnedest to try to like get the extra voice lines in
Yeah.
for the English to try to prevent a little bit of that to their credit at the time.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It'd be
For
interesting
sure.
to see what first chapter does.
Who
In
voices
terms of
Chloe's classmates at the academy?
That's true.
I forget their names.
Real.
One of them's really annoying.
whoever gets a face portrait will get the voice. That's how it goes.
That's a lot of voices. That there's a lot of face portraits in these earlier games. So yeah, we'll see. That's every little tidbit of new info for these games is like it really makes you wonder what they're gonna do.
I kind of have three bang, bang, bang news stories here. We don't really talk about these too much on the podcast because there's not a whole lot of meat on this bone. But two games that released early this year, I've already gotten like some significant patches. Avowed patch basically had a big overhaul in terms of not only just like quest progression and things like that, but I saw a lot of people really thinking that the perk points that you get when you level up in Avowed were very stingy, which means you really had to specialize in like what you were doing. You couldn't really hybrid class, between the different trait lines, as well as people feeling like they had super limited like resources available to upgrade weapons and things. Well, the last two patches for Avowed, I guess 1.2 and 1.3, really kind of targeted those. Like I logged back into my file and even retroactively, it was like, you got 5 more perk points. Go ahead and use them. Like, oh, neat. So just trying to like smooth out the I don't know if the leveling curve is quite the right term, but the progression in that game so you don't feel so hamstrung in terms of what you're allowed to do, give you a little bit more flexibility. So
Damn,
I
feel
think
like
that's a smart adjustment there. Go ahead.
I feel like I should have played it earlier then, because the way people were talking about it at launch, it's like, oh, that's what I'm in for. I kind of want something like that. Now it sounds like they're sanding down the edges a bit.
So we didn't play the real game, James. We got in too late. We can't call ourselves avowed gamers whenever we play now because we get the casual experience.
Well, there's the sort of thing where you can always choose just not to spend your 5 extra skill points or whatever.
Well,
But I do get where you're coming from in terms of like, here's multiple skill trees, but you can just really go ham on all of them. You don't really have to specialize. I don't think they went that far. I don't think they rounded it down too much, but I had no issues with the original experience, but I was playing it pretty thoroughly, so I was like exploring the whole map and things like that. Another early game that I definitely want to come to is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Adam and I are actually in Discord last night, and he's like, "Why does Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 have a 70 gig update?" I guess this is patch 1.2. The big things here are modding support, so official mod support, which I don't really know of. Like I played the first game without really any mods. I have no idea like what the modding scene there was. But Warhorse is really trying to come out the gate. Well, not at the gate, but close to it. With Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 having official mod support, so that was introduced, as well as barber options, which of course that's the second highest feature on everyone's list, is making Henry look as dapper as you want.
He's
As
already
well as
perfect.
yeah, as well as a bunch of other fixes. So, uh, so I guess they call this the first of several free DLC. So I guess this was already on the roadmap, and I'm sure it was, but I forgot. Like they have a cadence of free updates coming as well as the paid updates, and one of the free updates was barber support, modding support, and here it is.
Yeah, I
So if
appreciate
you're
also the transparency behind them, like even just like very finely detailed things, like they did better or refined Chinese translations for both traditional and simplified, improved Korean font, which is like I don't think I've ever read that out of pressure. It's like, okay, that's cool that like they improved the Korean font. I guess it was hard to read. And a newly recorded French voiceover. And I'm like, man, did they really botch the French voiceover? It's like one of those things like you would never think about, but it's like you read it, it's like, huh, I never knew that they were having problems with the other localization, scripts for the game.
Well, in the original Kingdom Come Deliverance, they didn't have Czech voiceover at first, and then they added it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which is, it's made by Czech people, so
Mm-hmm.
It really does just kind of nail down that so many games these days really are global products.
Yeah.
If saying a game is from Japan or from Poland or from the US kind of means less and less for not all games, but several games these days. And then the last one here, this is just kind of a footnote here. Pixel Remasters, which of course came out a while ago at this point. If you remember, draw your head back, 3-4 years mid-pandemic. Remember when those released and everyone was like, the font is terrible? Like you had to do these weird system workarounds or mods to get the font to look something more like what you remember from
And you had
playing
the waterfall of like alternate fonts. It's like since people found out, it's like it's relatively easy once you know. So people have like released like a mountain of like alternate like fonts you can use instead of like the shitty one that they launched with. That was a fun era.
Yeah, and so what this is an update to the mobile versions of them have updated them with what they call the classic font. Now, I've not like looked at iOS store reviews to see like how faithful it is, but here we are, 4 years later, they've updated the font of the mobile versions of these games, as well as updates for uh, BGM options as well. So you can choose the pixel remaster arrangements or the original, which seems like something that should have been there, but better late than never. But then, of course, begs the question, which I know I'm not using that idiom properly, but begs the question: when is this going to show up on the the other versions of the game, the console versions or the PC version? And we don't know. But they came out on the mobile version, so hopefully the PC versions or the other version won't be far behind. So, well, better late than never, I suppose. Good to have for those games to have. Just hey, I want to have the font that I knew from when I played these games.
And this is like coming hot off the heels. I think we discussed this on the last podcast where they like released a new update for the PC version that had some of these, but not all of these, like that you were mentioning.
Ah,
Yeah, so it's kind of like these stealth updates to both the PC version and the mobile version, but the mobile version got some stuff and the PC version got some stuff, but not all in between. It's not like parity in between these. Both of them are like sort of similar in the bug fixes of the game, but not like the BGM source. Obviously, didn't come to like the PC
what I
version.
always go back to is when Final Fantasy 12, the Zodiac Age was coming out. Every single version of that added something. So it was like I forget the order. Maybe Adam
it was
remembers. So it was
PlayStation
like,
first, and then I think they did the PC port after that, and then they did like the Switch and Xbox ports after that. And yes, they kept adding stuff, and they eventually backported all the changes, but it took them years to do that.
yeah, it was like this version has New Game Plus, but not New Game Minus. This one has the dark demon mode or whatever it was. This one doesn't. This one has this thing, or you can play it on NG mode. But it was so weird, like keeping track of all that. Like, why can't you just do this all at once? Come on, and it's like now they're doing not as bad, but similar things. With
Yeah,
those
so
experiments.
come back here in 5 years, and maybe we'll be at a state where all the versions of the game have all of the things.
Mhm. And we don't have a news story on this, but while talking about Square Enix, obviously we're at the 30th anniversary of Chrono Trigger, and there was a statement, and maybe I don't know if someone has more context than I did, that basically they have like several projects in the works, like a very kind of broad feel good statement.
I believe it was like the thing was like non-game projects. It was like further extended merchandising or marketing for like,
That's what I was thinking. Like,
but it's like beyond the game world. So it's not like they're not saying that like, they're making a sequel to Chrono Trigger or something like. It's like, hey, we're gonna add like
Chrono
new
Trigger will
merch
never get a
stuff.
sequel.
Yep. Yep.
I know I kind of expected that, like projects in the works, like we're gonna have an arrangement album or something. I have no idea.
They have like
But
they have like a
people
music stream for it, like so. I don't know
We're
if
going to
it's
release the soundtrack on Spotify, things like that.
Oh.
And of course, people see the headline and like immediately are like, finally, Chrono Break or whatever. It's like, hold your horses. Like,
It's
no.
never coming, guys. Sorry.
Chrono Cross Definitive
But,
Edition.
Oh
There we
God,
go.
please
obviously,
no. Barf.
well, we kind of already had that sort of.
No, I mean they're
Yeah.
they're remaking Chrono Cross to the in a manner the Chrono Trigger fans will love instead.
Okay. So, but yeah, obviously we'll report here if anything does come out of that. But yeah, Chrono Trigger is a great game, and it's 30 years old now. You're welcome.
Great.
All right.
Mm.
Other trailers. These ones are a little bit more minor. Clair Obscur Expedition 33, of course, is releasing at the end of next month. Sounds like they're going on a media, blitz of different character trailers, starting out, of course, with Gustave. But and like the trailer doesn't go into like, here's how you play with him, here's his unique mechanic, but it does show a little bit of it. But if you haven't like read and followed all the previews to really see how his overcharge works, the trailer doesn't really detail it enough on its own. You kind of have to read other stuff to see it. So it's really more for the flavor of the character than anything else. So we'll probably see some for the other characters as we go closer to launch. Here's another one. These ones are kind of releasing without a lot of fanfare. We're finally getting the DLCs for Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. Last month we had the one for Marissa, and this month we're getting the Chapter of Seign. Each of these is getting like a little 1-minute trailer for them. The only thing I've heard is that we had someone in our Discord say that they played the Chapter of Marissa and it wasn't very good. So I'm
Awesome.
interested, but not excited.
Yeah, I will play these DLCs, but I have like zero expectations at all. Actually, I pretty much have like negative expectations. These are gonna suck.
I
hope for the next
Yeah.
game, which I assume it sounded like they were going to do a sequel. It sounded like they were planning on it. I hope it doesn't do Kickstarter, and if I hope they do some sort of crowdfunding, like just don't promise like expansions, because then you just get stuff like this where it's just kind of like, we promised it, so we have to deliver, even if it probably would have been best without it.
I think they start to learn. I mean, come on. Have anyone remember the Mighty Number 9? How they offer like 10 different ports? Only 2, okay?
This is the second time Mighty Number 9's been
Mentioned.
referred to in this podcast, and I don't like it. It's distressing me.
Like, who are you going to go on your prom date?
I just think sometimes with Kickstarter games, you run into this problem where they want to make a stretch goal because they're trying to get funding. Like, everyone give us money so we can hit this goal, And obviously I get why they do it, but then it's like, oh, now we actually have to do it. And sometimes it just doesn't, it's not worth it.
And now you're making me want to check what the status is on that dual Kickstarter with the Wild Arms.
I heard
they
it's not
actually
going too
just
well.
had an
There's a
update.
news
No.
that came out recently.
They just had an update. They just sent out an update for the dual Kickstarter. They basically said our original Kickstarter had a March 2025 date. That's not going to happen. Which honestly, that's not a surprise at all. Kickstarters almost never hit their like target dates. They actually shared a screenshot of the menu of Armed Fantasia. Like, it's an in progress menu. Let me share it here real quick.
That's the Wild Hearts one. Not the
the Wild Hearts one seems like it's in an okay spot. The Wild Hearts, what the heck? Wild Arms.
Arms.
That one seems like it's in an okay spot. It's the other one, Penny Blood, that is like, is this even going to happen? I don't know.
You're still looking for a publisher, right?
And then like I played Penny Blood Hellbound. I would say it's a bad game. It's maybe not broken, but it's like not a very good game. And right now the Penny Blood Hellbound like team is like, they're making like Amazon Kindle short stories. Like, this is where we're at.
No way.
Yeah.
No.
Anyways, the Wild Arms successor seems like it'll actually exist at one point. 1 second, let me see if I can get this.
Yeah, because you're a backer, so you have the
yeah, I get the updates.
The updates. Yeah, I forgot what the I tried to find the Kickstarter picture. Armed Fantasia Kickstarter. I think that's the Google.
My computer is acting up here, but here we go.
Yeah. Okay. Because it's called double Kickstarter, not dual Kickstarter for their.
Yeah, so there's like we actually have like a menu screenshot of Armed Fantasia. It's obviously like in progress, but it actually feels like they've shown screenshots of some of the characters, they've shown screenshots of the menu, and it seems like, hey, there's actually a game in development here. So
Okay. Well,
By the way, 0% of the Steam reviews for Chapter of Marissa are positive.
Jeez.
There's only 11.
great.
But the 11 people who went out of their way to play it were like, nope.
Well, or leave a review rather.
Right.
One person said 5 chests, 1 mini boss, 1 boss, 1 dungeon. It's basically just a bonus. It's a side quest.
And how expensive is it? Like $8 or something like that?
It is $8.
Jesus, like
That's a
yeah,
lot.
I remember seeing that. I'm like, that seems really expensive.
I got Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 for like $8. Years after the fact, admittedly, but all right. What else? Fuga Melodies of Steel. Fuga Melodies of Steel 3 got a trailer talking about its battle system as well as its endings, like secret endings or character endings. And maybe I'll let James speak to this because I saw you used to say something on Blue Sky about what you were trying to glean about what they were showing in terms of like number of endings or something like
Well,
that.
no,
And
as part of the, they did send out a PR blast. Part of the things they said is we knew that Fuga 3 was going to have branching paths in the narrative to some extent, but we didn't know exactly what that meant for things. Now we know is that there's 8 endings. There's 5 bad endings. There's a normal ending, a true ending, and then a special ending you get for getting all the other endings. So it seems like that it's kind of similar to the way they're saying it, it sounds like even though they say there's a true ending and a special ending, the real thing is that there's a normal ending, a good ending, and then a true ending. That's the vibe I'm getting. But I think this is good because one of the main problems that I think Fuga 2 had is that it was too derivative. The fact that we've already seen a bunch of stuff like here's how you can upgrade the Tyrannus, you can have totally different routes, you have like a bunch of different like small features that add up. It's like this seems like it's going to be a way more fully featured game. Whereas like I enjoyed Fuga 1 and 2, but part of the reason I did enjoy it was at the time it was a very like streamlined and focused experience and was like tightly designed. But I felt like, and I even said this at the time, I felt like if 3 was of the same vein, it was going to get old really quickly because 2 is already basically just a Master Quest version of Fuga 1, for lack of a better term. So
Yeah, I think
I'm
Fuga 2
excited.
is undoubtedly a better game than Fuga 1, but it's so iterative.
Yeah. It's like I just on the spot came up with it feels like a Master Quest version of Fuga 1. And it's like not the more I think about it, that really does feel like a pretty apt comparison. But yeah, I'm excited for 3. Hopefully the extra scope doesn't bloat it out because that's absolutely going to be a concern of mine. But you know what?
Sure. Their next update is like it's an open world now.
But anyways, if nothing else, the soundtrack is going to be incredible. The gameplay itself should still be awesome because that's like one thing Fuga 1 and 2 were really great about was the battle system was very satisfying. So I'm excited.
and that's coming out on May 29th.
Yep.
This one I should have brought up when we were talking about Square Enix and Pixel Remasters. They've also sold over 5 million copies across all platforms.
Pixel Remasters, that's a good amount. Good. And then I guess the FF series, collectively, all of the Final Fantasy series has now sold over 200 million copies. That's a
Which
big
to me, I
number.
look at that and I can't like contextualize it because that's a lot of games, spin-offs and mobile games and card games and like digital card games, like weird stuff. Chocobo racing, is that included? I don't know. Things like that. Like it's a big
Garland.
number for a big number. Yeah, big number for a big number of games, but obviously
but,
a very long history there.
but you can be cynical about like, well, GTA 5 sold like cajillion copies more. It's like thanks.
Yeah, GTA 5 sold 50 million copies on its own. Step it up, Square Enix. And then in terms of release dates, I think I only found one that was new. Through Gmode, which I forget what that is. Adam, can you help me out here? Glory of Heracles 3 will be ported to PC. And that's like a feature phone game. Like that we talked about that Aegis feature phone game that came out around the same time as Persona 3. getting ported to PC through a similar means.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I contextualize this. Like one of those 2000 pre-iPhone era games that would never leave Japan because our phones were so different and behind.
Yeah, Dreamo is basically like, they're doing that initiative that you're saying, like, hey, there's like these flip phone games that were exclusive to flip phones at the time, and they don't have like any release on any modern platforms, even modern mobile platforms. They're doing this initiative like, hey, we wanna, for game preservation purposes, they wanna put these on a modern platform like Steam. Like, they also had like previously, like they might have also like showed up like at the Wii Shop, for example, or like the Nintendo eShop, like, but they still had like classic releases going for that, for those storefronts. And you also see some of it on Switch as well, but I think that's through another company that does like PC Engine. So it's cool to see that, like, they're continuing to do this, even though it doesn't have like, some of these may not have like official English localizations. That stuff can be ironed out for the future, as long as they have like something set in stone, at least in a forward-looking, forward-moving platform, like, that will be preserved in perpetuity.
And then Kite did throw in a piece of trivia here for Glory of Heracles III. I guess one of the scenario writers for this game was Kazushige Nojima, of Square Enix fame.
There you go.
Who did like
Ray Nodis.
most of also that.
Ray Nodis fame.
And that covers us for the news topics that I had queued up for this episode of the Tetracast. So thank you for welcoming me back and having me have a chance to talk a little bit about the games that I played while I was out, and then talking about Atelier Yumia, a little bit of Rise of the Ronin, of course, which is now available on PC, and looking forward to things like Clair Obscur Expedition 33 and Trails in the Sky First Chapter.
Next week we'll have Xenoblade X, I think.
Yep.
Yeah,
right?
Is that next week?
Yep.
Oh, awesome. So we'll have a handful of people here that can talk to that, both in terms of original game and remake. Of course, we kind of had a prelude to that a few weeks ago when Adam talked about his and Cullen's little primer document. So we'll be able to kind of dovetail or bookend the other side of that conversation there. Maybe touch on a little bit about the stuff you weren't allowed to talk about before. What's new?
I will say that for as far as embargo goes, we cannot talk about the new content, like
at all.
Shown. Nope.
Maybe
not even in vague
so
terms. I mean, which is probably fair, but like they don't want. People don't want to hear. I know a lot of times people like, don't tell me anything, but what did you think, kind of thing. But we're not allowed to talk about the new content at all. So like, I just know someone is going to take. So Cullen is reviewing this for us. He's like, did you even play the new content? You didn't even talk about it. It's like, yeah, because we're not allowed to. So.
Yeah, but I think it's like definitely worth mentioning, at least in the review, saying we can't talk about this.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Yeah, there's just at least sometimes you just have to tell people outright, we were forbidden to talk about this. I'm sorry.
I'm sure someone will argue that, like, he didn't play it or he's lying or whatever. Like, no.
He didn't review it properly.
They're also finally releasing that new Assassin's Creed game, Shadows game, right? I forgot if that got delayed again or not.
Oh yeah, that's this next week too. So.
Yeah, should try to find
Who is covering that? Did someone cover
Dave.
that? Oh, Dave is all right.
Yeah.
Cool. Adam, are you gonna get some Assassin's Creed?
No,
you're our biggest Assassin's Creed fan here.
I'm the biggest Assassin's Creed fan. I played like 4 of the 12 games or whatever.
That's more than us, I think.
Yeah, I will go with Adam doing it. I'm like thinking of how much I played. I'm like, yes, Adam, it's all you.
Okay.
So obviously check us out online at rpgsite.net. Read the review for Atelier Yumia. Read the companion pieces for on Steam Deck and comparing the Switch and the other console versions. We have the interview with Rise of the Ronin, the developers for the PC release. That's up on the site as well. Follow RPG Site on all the social media channels. Just search for RPG space site, SITE, and you should be able to find us. Join our Discord, discord.gg/RPG site. If you've listened to this podcast on whatever service you listen to it through or directly on the website, leave us a thumbs up, a rating, or a comment. We'd love to see those. And you'll hear from us next week on the next episode of the Tetracast. So until you hear from us then, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to y'all later.